today we want to go a step further and think about what we do with what we have received. We are not responsible for what we have inherited. In that sense, we are not free. We do not choose the country we are born in. We do not choose our race. We do not choose our religion. We do not choose our parents. These things are given to us. And each one of us, in his own way, makes his way through life as best he can, and according to those lives which God gives everyone. He doesn't use the life, that is his own fault. Most people, and certainly those of you who are here today, because if you weren't believers, you wouldn't be here, begin our lives with a certain feeling of obligation to the church in which we are born. We are accustomed to go to church. We try to be obedient. We learn what our church teaches us. And then there comes a moment when we begin to question. There are some very blessed people who never doubt, for whom God is always in heaven and all is well with the world. But even for such people, there comes a moment when they must ask themselves, am I a true worshipper? Do I really believe what I say I believe? What does it all really stand for? So there comes a moment of astounding awakening in which we see the world with new eyes and question it all. And I think we should question it. I don't believe in the faith of those who simply go along because I have been told so, or because it says so in the good book. Because there are many ways of interpreting what stays in the good book. Unfortunately, that has created many a division between us, because we have seen it in different ways and understood it in different ways. How should we, perhaps at this moment, regard just those divisions which we find within the Christian church itself? And I'd like here not to say something that comes out of my own understanding, but from a sermon I heard given by one of our great Orthodox preachers. And he said that we were standing closer together today than we did on the day of parting, because then we had our backs turned away from each other and we were going away. Now we have stopped going away and we have turned round and we are facing each other. This, of course, does not mean yet that we are in any way united or that we all believe the same thing. Nor should we, for the sake of convenience, for the sake of even brotherly love, say we agree with something we do not agree with. Because each of us has been born within a certain church and a certain tradition. And it is only within that church and that tradition that we know how to be faithful to Christ himself. And to be unfaithful to our church is being unfaithful to Christ. Unless we see clearly that perhaps another church has the way which we believe is the true way. We cannot in any way stand in judgment on each other and say, I know better, because only God in heaven knows which one of us knows better. But we do know what we believe, and to this we have to be faithful. And if we do not understand what it is that we believe, then we cannot be faithful. So, I think we should listen to the words of Christ, who said that we should look, that we should knock, that we should ask, we should inquire, we should find out for ourselves. Especially we should try to find out for ourselves in prayer. We monastics are taught that above all teaching, ourselves teach us the most. That is to say, when we are in silent prayer by ourselves, in ourselves, praying to God. It is this finding of the answer that God has for each one of us within ourselves. It is a question of prayer. There are many systems of prayer. We have hundreds of books upon the subject, and each one has its lesson, and from each one there is something to be learned. Yet, without the help of Christ, we cannot learn. Both faith and the gift of prayer are gifts. Gifts which God gives us. We can search and we must ask. But it is He who gives it to us. Not our own intelligence, not our own judgment. Though it is with our own intelligence and our own judgment that we finally understand. So the greatest prayer of all, apart from the Lord's Prayer and the reading of the Psalms, remains, we Orthodox feel, the prayer of heart, called the Jesus Prayer. It is a prayer founded upon the story of the publican who, coming to the temple, sees all the others praying and sees how grand they are. And there's the Pharisee who feels himself so superior because he knows so much. The poor publican knows very little. So he only bends his head and asks God to have mercy on him because he is a sinner. So from this we have made the prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. It is a simple little prayer, easily learned, easily said, anytime, anywhere, and very, very often. The fathers teach that we should pray short prayers often. It is the only way in which we can really do what St. Paul tells us, to pray always. This has worried many a theologian and many a monk and many a saint. How should we pray continuously? We feel the answer lies just in this very simple little prayer of humility, of realizing our smallness and our littleness, and asking God to fill it. the modernization of things, you never more see the old water mills, or if you do, seldom, but perhaps you've seen pictures of them. And some of you may have seen those old ones which are still kept as museums. How the wheel turns because it accepted the water and it poured it out. It was by more water coming in and pouring it out, and accepting more water and pouring it out, that the wheel turns and that the mill works and that the grist is ground. And so it is with us also. We have always to bend down in humility and empty ourselves of everything so that we can receive God. And when we have received Him, then again we empty ourselves out in love upon people around us. And then once more we see how small and empty we are, and once more we bend our heads and we are the empty bucket that waits to be filled again with the love of God. And if we could try to see our daily lives like that, we could long time, slowly achieve, I think, something near what St. Paul meant when he said that we should pray always. We heard in the wonderful lesson of today all that God has done for man and given him. We hear of Paul, who knew so much, and suddenly saw the light. Now, it's not given to all of us, as it was to him, to suddenly have an illumination, a sudden moment of understanding of what true faith is. Yet I am quite convinced that such a moment does come in one way or other in each man's life. There is a moment where suddenly something becomes clear to us. Some word in a prayer we have repeated many times suddenly has understanding. Or we know of so many saints who have stood in church, who were sinners, who had had a gay old time, and suddenly heard the words, "Sell all that thou hast and follow me." And they actually did get up and sell all they had and followed Christ. And never worried if anybody else cared about what they did or not. One of the modern saints, a Frenchman, was like this. Charles de Foucault. He was an orphan. He was very rich, and his grandparents adored him, and they spoiled him. And they bought him a commission in one of the smartest regiments of France, and he had a wonderful time. But he was such a bad man that finally the crack regiment threw him out because his behavior was so bad. But when the war came and his regiment was going back into battle, he felt the call to go back. And so he asked to be received as an ordinary soldier, because he knew as an officer he couldn't return. But he felt it was his duty to stand by the word and the promise which he had given. It was his first step back to loyalty. And he fought so wonderfully that he regained his position as an officer. But then he understood that there was a loyalty above that, something greater and bigger still. And so he left all his riches, he left all the army, honors he had, the decorations he received, and he became a chaplain. And even that didn't satisfy him quite. And then I believe he went to Bethlehem for a time and was a gardener in the convent of some Carmelites. And finally he went back to Morocco, which he loved. And he lived there in an old fort, all by himself. Because he loved the Arabs. And he felt that he needed to show the Christian love to his people. So he remained amongst them. And he always hoped that somebody would one day join him. And he made a little monastery out of his old fort. And he built himself those things which were necessary. And he read Mass every day. And he had just a little Arab boy who came and watched it. Nobody else ever came. He had friends still in the army that paid him visits, but nobody ever joined him. And then by one of these chances, a group of Arabs took him prisoner, had nothing against him in particular, set him aside and left one young man to keep guard over him. The poor priest made a movement unintentionally, and the Arab shot him dead. That was the end of his story. Nothing glorious, nothing showy, nothing. Yet today, he is one of the most followed men there are. The little brothers of Jesus, the little sisters of Jesus are all over the world, trying to follow in the steps of this man who, when he was alive, had no success whatsoever and never knew what a great person he was. And even today, they have not canonized him. So you see how for each one, in his own way, the light does shine. And what is asked of us is that we should answer it. That when the call comes, we should follow. It may be a very simple one. It may be a very unshowy one. It may be one that is criticized very bitterly by others. But if we know in our heart that God has called, and I assure you, when once he has called, we know it. And those who refuse it at their own peril. But the same bishop who I studied before wrote in one of the books he gave me, it is a dangerous thing to declare your love for God, because he's going to ask of you down to the very last drop. He does. But it is this kind of love the world is in need of today. The love that really comes from above, that answers the call. And he does call us all. But we have to learn. We have to practice. We have to understand what it means. And therefore we must not ever hurry. And therefore again we return to prayer. Especially the prayer of the heart. That means an interior prayer, thinking within yourself, in all your thoughts within yourself, until you almost physically feel that the prayer is within you, that you are really praying with your whole being. Then one of the Holy Fathers says that when you are like this, and you are able to descend your mind into your heart, and then in your heart stand before God, and stand before him every day, every hour, until the end of your life. Then you will reach it. Amen.